Welcome to this NARFE Federal Benefits Institute webinar. Our host presenter, Tammy Flanagan, will provide an hour-long presentation uniquely designed for federal employees. This presentation will be followed by a 1-hour online chat session available to those of you watching live. Instructions on how to enter the chat session will be provided at the end of the presentation. Both the webinar and the chat will be recorded, archived, and available for free to all NARFE members at www.narfe.org.
Questions will be taken during the chat session only. In order for you to have a full view of the presentation materials, we ask that you now close the chat box located on the left of your screen. On the top left of your screen, above the presenter icon and directly above the word presenter, you will see double arrows. We have circled the exact location here on this slide. Simply click here and your left side panel will collapse. We will give you all a moment to locate the arrows and collapse the chat panel. Should you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, please contact our webcast service provider for assistance. They can be reached toll-free at 877-297-2901. Again, that's 877-297-2901. This contact information can also be found in your webinar reminder email. On behalf of NARFE, thank you for your membership and participation in this Federal Benefits Institute webinar.
Hi, welcome to today's webinar. We're in a new year and a new series of NARFE Federal Benefits Institute webinars. My name is Tammy Flanagan, and I'm here today to talk to you about speeding the retirement journey. Today's webinar was inspired by the white paper that you can find on NARFE's website called by the same name, Speeding the Retirement Journey, that was written by David Tobenkin. So today we're going to be talking about what you can do to help speed along that process of your retirement application so that you can move from employee to annuitant. Now, if you haven't met me before in a previous webinar, just to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a previous retirement benefits specialist who worked for the government back in the olden days, back in the 1980s. And since then, I've been teaching retirement planning seminars for federal employees just like you throughout the government, and have done other types of work such as write a column for GovExec, write some articles for NARFE magazine, and most recently present these webinars for you here at NARFE Federal Benefits Institute. So I'd like to thank NARFE for once again trusting me to come and present this information to you, and also to thank you for being here today with us to listen to this information and hopefully gain some useful, helpful information to help you along the way. Now, when we're finished with today's presentation, I hope you'll stay and join us as we do an online chat when David Snell, who's NARFE's Director of Federal Benefits, will be down with me to chat with you and answer questions that you might have to help you process your retirement application and get your retirement through OPM and get those annuity checks coming to you right on time. So we have a lot to cover today, and I hope you'll stay with us for the whole hour and then the hour following the website or the webinar so that we can chat with you and follow along as well. Now, as always, we'll be keeping these webinars on the website at the Federal Benefits Institute, so please be sure to tell your friends and coworkers about these online chats as well. If you have questions following today's webinar, you can also find those questions answered at NARFE, federalbenefits@narfe.org. And we'll be giving you that information also during the online chat that follows. So let's go ahead and get started today with our topic of speeding your retirement journey. So when we're talking about retiring from federal service, we're talking about the civil service or the FERS retirement application that you have to fill out to get the whole process started. Now, for those of you under the federal employees retirement system, you may also be thinking about your Social Security application and starting to process your TSP withdrawal. We'll be talking a little bit about both of those other benefits today, but mostly we're going to focus on the civil service or the FERS retirement benefit, how you go from being an employee to becoming an annuitant, and what are some of the pitfalls that can slow down the process along the way. Now, throughout the years of retirement processing and all the things that happen throughout the years, there have been a lot of focus and attention on the delays of retirement processing, and perhaps you've read about some of those in the news and throughout the media that focuses the attention on what's been going on. You can see up on the screen that we have here today that there was a study that came out just last year from the Inspector General at OPM that focused on the customer relations at OPM and all the things that have been slowing down when it comes just to communicating with you, the employee, and the retirees when you have questions about your retirement or problems that come up along the way in trying to get response to your communications. It says that OPM hasn't been able to respond to written communications not even within 60 days of your request. And when you send a written communication in the mailbox or when you send a voicemail in the voicemail box, some of those aren't even getting responded to. So it seems like one of the better ways to get information from OPM will be online. And later on, I'm going to talk more about the online services that are available at OPM. At Retirement Services Online, they have 513,000 people last year who accessed that service and was able to respond to 5 million transactions. Compare that to 1.67 million phone calls that OPM took last year and was only able to respond to 1.27 million of those phone calls that actually got answered, which means 400,000 of those calls were abandoned. So the online services would be one of the ways, or the technology today might be one of the ways to help speed along the process. So if you have ever used OPM services online, that might be one of the things you might want to try if you have questions about your retirement benefit. Now, the other thing that happened recently was a letter went to the General Accounting or Government Accountability Office from Congress, again addressing some of the problems with retirement processing and how long it takes to process a retirement case. Back in 2013, OPM came up with a strategic plan to help speed up this process and try to get 90% of the retirement cases done in 60 days or less. Well, that hasn't quite happened yet, and OPM continues to get overwhelmed with so many retirements because we do have many, many federal employees who are retiring every month that goes by. But some of the things that OPM has on their strategic plan that they are implementing as we speak would be to be able to find ways to improve the retirement process itself on OPM's end, and they have taken measures to do that, just to streamline the whole process. Another thing that they've done was to try to hire more customer service specialists and also legal administrative specialists who actually process the cases, and also those folks who are having trouble answering the phones because there's just not enough people. To give you some idea, at OPM there's only one customer service specialist for every 27,000 retirees. To compare that to Social Security Administration, there's one customer service person answering phones there for every 8,000 people who call into Social Security. So customer service does need to be improved, and that certainly is obvious. The third pillar of the strategic plan is to incorporate a relationship between OPM and the agency and OPM and you. In fact, OPM has even partnered with organizations such as NARFE to try to help us understand what needs done to help improve this process of going from agency to annuitant. And so we're going to talk about some of the things that we can do as employees to help smooth our own retirement process and help that along the way. And of course, the fourth pillar of that strategic plan is to improve the IT. And of course, that's still taking place and has more room for improvement. So we'll be watching for that as the years go by. You may have seen this list of the cases that come into OPM, and this might help you understand why things do take so long as far as the volume of retirement cases that OPM does process on a monthly basis. Just when they think they might be getting caught up, we get to the end of the year when traditionally so many federal employees retire. We saw that last year in January, OPM received 15,423 new cases. Well, of course, this is January of 2017, and I have no doubt that they're probably receiving just as many cases this month, if not more. The backlog of cases or inventory of cases as of last month was over 15,000. So I'm sure OPM did their best to try to reduce that inventory in preparation for all the cases that came in at the end of 2016. But try as they might, they can't get that inventory down to zero in regard to the fact that it's still a paper process system. When you file for retirement, and I know some of you file electronically by going online, filling out the retirement application, and even submitting that application to your agency electronically. But once your Human Resource Office receives the application, they actually have to print it on paper and put it together with records from your personnel office and also payroll records, and all of that gets mailed to the Office of Personnel Management, where they will take a look at it and go through it page by page in a specific order to be able to validate and verify your federal service history and pay the retirement benefit that you've deserved and worked for all these years. So it's a very tedious, time-consuming process, and there's various steps along the way that can sometimes slow down the process and make it take even longer. So again, we want to talk about some of the things that perhaps we can do to help speed it up. So what are some of these things? What are the main things we can do to speed up that retirement process? I would say that the two main things would be to begin early. In fact, if you were to ask me when should I begin preparing for retirement, I would have to say probably as soon as you start working. Especially today when retirement has a lot to do with saving and investing, we need to really understand how it works even from the very start of our career. With FERS, the newer retirement system, being that three-tiered system based on a government pension, a Social Security benefit, and retirement savings, we have to know how that works, whether we stay in federal service our entire career or whether we move from one career to another and carry those savings with us and have that Social Security record follow us throughout our life. That government pension benefit is really unique to federal service, so if we do plan to leave federal service early, when can we claim a deferred benefit? And if we do stay long enough to retire, when will that be and how much can we receive based on our service? So it does pay to understand how your benefit's computed and how you become eligible for it. As you move through your career at different stages, whether it's beginning, mid-career, or pre-retirement, there's different things you can do along the way to prepare and to do some of the homework as you go. Now, one of the other things you want to do as you prepare for pre-retirement is to take charge of that application, make sure you understand how it's being processed and what are some of the factors that go into it. So those are some of the things we're going to cover in these next few slides. As we do in many of the webinars, I like to test your knowledge and ask you a question just to see what your opinion is or what you think about a certain topic. So here's the first one for today. What do you think is the average processing time it takes for a civil service, CSRS or FERS retirement application to be processed at OPM? So from the time OPM receives your retirement claim until they're completely finished with it and you start receiving your full retirement benefit, how long do you think that takes on average? Do you think it's 10 to 30 days? Do you think it varies from case to case? Do you think the average is 60 days or less? Is it 6 months or 180 days? Or does it take on average 2 years? So what do you think? Well, I guess on certain circumstances, any one of those answers could possibly be correct, but really the average is 60 days. 70% of federal retirement benefits are processed within 60 days of being received at OPM. So that's not a bad record. The goal is 90% to be processed within 60 days, so we're not quite there yet. But at least 7 out of 10 of you who retire will get your first retirement check, full benefit, within 2 months of having OPM received it. Now the other 30% will take a little longer. And the reason for that longer processing time could be any number of things. It could be as simple as you might have forgotten to sign one of the forms. It could be as complicated as something missing in your retirement package that came from your agency, such as a payroll record or verification of some of your service. It might even be something that's not quite clear in a divorce agreement that provides part of your retirement to a former spouse. OPM pays benefits to 2.6 million federal retirees and survivor annuitants. Keep in mind, that's almost the same as the number of federal employees who are currently serving as federal employees today. So what's the very first thing you can do to help speed up the process? I think if you're a longtime federal employee, you might even remember being told this, maybe even on your first day on the job. I know I do. Back in 1980 was when I was hired, and I remember somebody from the personnel office coming into our EOD class and telling us to make sure that when we get one of those notification of personnel action statements, that we save that employee copy somewhere safe. And that still would hold true today. I know today your personnel action statements are filed electronically, but if it was me, I would still make a copy of that SF-50 or personnel action statement and put it someplace where I could get a hold of it later on, especially if I was to leave federal service. So I still go by the old saying, keep that copy of your personnel folder a personal copy, and your agency will keep the official copy of it electronically. So when you have those personnel records, some of the things you want to make sure you have a documentation of would be the beginning and ending dates of your federal service. So when you started your federal career, that very first SF-50 that said you were appointed on this particular date, that's your beginning date of service. And then the one when you left, that's the ending date. You may have had several breaks in service throughout your career where you came and you left. Maybe you had a break in service and then you came back again. It's important to have all of that federal service documented. Maybe you served with different types of service, such as military service, or maybe other types of service that was potentially creditable, such as maybe working for the DC government. So be sure that all of that service has been verified and deemed creditable as well. The other thing I would look for is what type of retirement coverage did you have? Were you always under FERS? Or did you start your career under CSRS? Have you remained under the old retirement system? Did you ever have a period of time when you were under FICA or Social Security rather than federal retirement? Did you ever have a period of time when you switched retirement systems? Maybe you were CSRS to begin with and then you transferred to FERS. All of those dates of changing retirement systems would also be very important to determine when you're eligible to retire and the value of your retirement benefit. Another thing we look at when we're determining when you're eligible and how much your retirement's going to be is your work schedule. Did you always work full-time? Was there ever a time you were part-time or intermittent? Sometimes you may have even worked something called WAE, which stands for when actually employed, another form of intermittent service. Have you ever had a period of leave without pay during your career? Extended periods of leave without pay can also impact your retirement if they went longer than 6 months. So be sure that you understand how your service history can impact your eligibility for retirement and also your calculation of the benefit. And also be sure you understand what counts and what doesn't. Sometimes service counts for leave accrual, but it doesn't necessarily count for retirement. So be sure you review this with your benefits person at your agency if you're not sure. You can ask questions even if you're not ready to retire. Maybe you're only at the mid-career level of your service and you're not ready to request a retirement estimate, but if you have questions about your service history, it's never too early to ask. Sometimes it can take a long time to fix an error or to find missing documentation, so it's never too early to start that search. If you've ever paid back a deposit, if you're not sure what a deposit is, that's when you have missing contributions to the retirement fund. If you look at your leave and earnings statement, you'll notice that every 2 weeks you have a withholding for FERS or CSRS coming out of your paycheck. Well, if you ever had a period of time when you didn't pay into the retirement fund, but yet you were a federal employee, you may have a period of what we call non-deduction time that you might be able to pay for. Or if you served in the military, you might be able to pay a deposit into civil service or FERS so that you can credit that time towards your retirement benefit. Or if you had a break in service and you took a refund of your retirement contributions, you could maybe pay a redeposit. Well, if you've already done that, do you have a record of that payment? If you do, your agency may not be aware that you've paid it. So maybe it would be a good idea to put a copy of that record that you might have at home and file it in your electronic personnel folder at work. That way, when you request a retirement estimate, there will be a record of that payment on file so that there won't be any question that that service has been paid for. So keep good records. Make sure you have the documentation that can prove the career that you've actually worked. So what's the timeline when you're really at that pre-retirement stage of your career? When you're out there 3 to 12 months before retirement, what should you be doing? The very first thing you want to do is to take a look at the forms that you need to fill out in order to retire. The main document is your retirement application. Whether it's civil service or FERS, there's the application for retirement. You want to turn that in usually about 3 months before you retire, or at least 30 days, but in the larger agency, at least 3 months. And you're going to also want to request a retirement estimate from your human resource office so that you have an idea how much your retirement income is going to provide as far as replacement of your salary. Now that's going to help you understand if you can financially afford to retire. So along with that, you might want to start estimating your thrift savings plan income and also your Social Security benefit if you're old enough to receive it. Once you put all 3 levels of FERS together, you might find that you can afford to retire, and it's time to start doing the mental transition to retirement as well. So you can start thinking about what you're going to do with all that extra time once you go out the door. So this 3 to 12 months before retirement is when you start thinking about setting the date, doing the real detailed financial planning, and getting those final retirement estimates based on that date that you have in mind. So now we're ready to turn in that application. So if we were going to retire this year on May 31st of, let's say, 2017, we might want to put that application in for retirement around March 1st at the earliest. I wouldn't give too much notice because remember, if this is something that our agency has to process for us and we put it in too early, they might put it aside and work on somebody else's and forget we even put it in. So I think that sweet spot is somewhere between 60 and 90 days before you separate. Now, if you're in a very small agency that doesn't have that many employees who are retiring, you probably could get away with a 30 days notice for retirement. So what I'd suggest is talk to your human resource office or your retirement specialist at your agency to find out what they suggest. You might even have a place on your employee page of your agency's website where they have a list of rules or at least some suggestions about how to prepare for retirement from your agency. When it comes time to apply for Social Security, go to ssa.gov and you'll find that if you give Social Security Administration 3 months notice, you should get your first check on time. Some of you may want to coordinate receiving Social Security benefits along with your civil service or FERS retirement, where others may want to stagger that benefit and apply for FERS and maybe delay Social Security until later. Not everyone's going to fully retire when you leave federal service. One of the nice things about the FERS system is that since it is a 3-tiered system, you don't have to turn all 3 benefits on at the same time, although you can if you want to. Here's that application for civil service and FERS. Under the old system, the application is a standard form 2801, and under FERS, it's a 3107. You can find this application at OPM's website, the Office of Personnel Management, or opm.gov. These forms are fillable if you find them online, so you can type in the information so that they're nice and neat. Keep in mind that OPM now has a policy that in many areas of the form, if there's an erasure or whiteout used, they'll send it back and it won't be acceptable. So I'd suggest that you fill these forms out online so they're perfectly filled out, very neat, and don't have any of that markings on them or erasures because they could be rejected and you'll have to start over, which of course will delay the whole processing. Also, be sure you sign the application anytime there's a place for a signature. I remember in my experience there were many cases where an application would be returned because somebody forgot to sign it. In one place on the application, the signature line is right in the middle of the page, which I guess might be kind of hard to notice, so be sure to read the application very carefully. Some agencies, like I said before, do allow you to file electronically for retirement, which again might make you think that OPM processes this thing electronically, but they don't. They will be printed out on paper eventually. Now, if you're going to be electing less than full survivor benefits for your spouse if you're married, keep in mind your spouse will have to provide their notarized signature to authorize that election, because your spouse is entitled to the full survivor benefit, so they have to provide their consent to anything less. So be sure to allow enough time to do things like that, and also to find missing documents such as your marriage certificate or perhaps a copy of your divorce decree if necessary. On the application, and I have a picture of it up here, you don't necessarily read the whole thing, but you may notice on this application that there's quite a few areas where there are yes or no questions. So you want to be sure that when you come across a question that says yes or no, that you answer that yes or no question, even if it doesn't really apply to you. Just say no if it doesn't and move on to the next. So be sure to fully complete all of the application. For instance, in the area that's called marital information, if you're single, you still want to complete the question that says, are you married now? Yes or no. So you don't just skip the question because, again, the application would be returned. Now, we did a previous webinar in the NARFE Federal Benefits Institute on electing survivor benefits and talking about this very important decision of electing what kind of a retirement do you want. But since we're talking about this whole transition to retirement today, I thought I'd go over this one part of the application real briefly with you. But if you want to look at this in much more detail, please go through some of the other webinars that we've done in the past, and you have a whole webinar on this one topic, because this is one of the most important decisions that you make when you're filling out that retirement application. So first of all, let's start with someone who's single when they retire and they're filling out the part of the application where you're electing the type of retirement that you want. On a person who's single, you would most likely elect an annuity payable just during your lifetime. And if that's your election, that means that when you retire, there won't be any reduction to the benefit. But when you die, your retirement will die with you. It'll just simply stop. Now, on the other hand, if you have somebody who's depending on you financially for income and you wanted to leave that person a survivor annuity, you could elect something that's called an insurable interest survivor benefit. You can name that person as your insurable interest and they would receive a benefit if you should predecease them. Now, the requirement for that is that you have to be insurable. You'd have to prove your insurability by going to your physician and getting a statement of your good health and include that with your retirement application. You would also need to take a reduction to your retirement to pay for that benefit. The reduction can be quite expensive, anywhere from 10 to 40%, based on the difference between your age and the person you're naming. So in many cases, it may not be a practical election due to the expense. You may also elect a survivor annuity for a former spouse, but oftentimes that's a requirement if it's in the divorce decree. So if there is something written into your divorce agreement that says your former spouse was awarded survivor benefits, it may not be a choice. But there is a place on the retirement application where you can elect that benefit. For married employees, as I mentioned before, the default election for both CSRS and FERS is the maximum survivor benefit. And that means that under civil service, your spouse would receive 55% of your retirement if you die first. Under the FERS system, on the FERS basic benefit, they would receive 50% if you predecease them. Now, the reduction to your retirement for that election would either be 10% under FERS or a little less than 10% under CSRS. So it's almost like you're paying for life insurance by providing this benefit to your spouse. The difference is this is a lifetime benefit to your spouse regardless of how long they outlive you, and it's also protected by cost of living adjustments that are granted every year. So it's a very valuable benefit, although it can be very costly due to that 10% reduction. So it's something you've got to give a lot of thought to and discuss with your spouse prior to retirement. If you want to elect anything less than the maximum benefit, it's going to require spousal consent. Now, you also notice on this slide that you can do a partial survivor benefit, which would cause less of a reduction to your retirement, but it would also provide less of a benefit to your surviving spouse. Your spouse would have to agree to this election, but it would protect their entitlement to health benefits. So if your spouse is depending on you for your health insurance as well as your money, then you have to leave some form of survivor benefit for them. So either the full survivor benefit or partial survivor benefit election would be in order. Now, if you're married and your spouse doesn't need your money or your health insurance, you could elect an annuity payable just during your lifetime, just as a single person would. But again, that would require spousal consent, just like the partial benefit. If you've been divorced, depending on whether or not your former spouse was awarded part of your retirement or survivor benefits in the divorce agreement, will determine whether or not you need to provide a copy of that divorce decree with your retirement application. So there's a question on the retirement application about this. The question says, is there a living former spouse who was awarded part of your retirement or survivor benefits in your divorce decree? And if so, you must provide a copy of the divorce decree with your retirement. Now, if the answer to that question is no, then you wouldn't necessarily need to include your divorce agreement with your retirement application. In fact, if you do, keep in mind that means your retirement's going to be processed one more step along the way by going to the court order section for review. So if you know that your former spouse does not have any entitlement by court order to your retirement benefits, then you wouldn't need to leave or include a copy of that divorce decree. Now, if you'd like to provide survivor benefits to the former spouse, there is a place for you to elect it on the retirement application, but I've rarely ever seen that election made. It's usually something that is awarded in the divorce decree, if ever used. So as I mentioned before, when you're filing that retirement application, anywhere from 1 to 3 months prior to retirement, there might be some other documents that you need to include along with the form. So some of the things you might need to find to include with the retirement application would be a copy of your marriage certificate, if you're married, of course, a copy of your divorce decree if there's something in there that provides benefits to your former spouse. Perhaps you'll need military documentation if you served on active duty. You may also need a copy of your waiver of military retired pay if you're going to include your military service if you're retired military. You may also need copies of your payment of deposits or redeposits that you've already paid prior to your retirement. If you have any pending workers' compensation claims, not scheduled awards, but any pending claims where you want to get continuation of your pay, OPM needs to know about that because they can't pay retirement benefits at the same time you're getting compensated by workers' comp. So those have to be coordinated with the Department of Labor. So those might be some other things that you need to find in order to file for retirement benefits. So have a heads up on those and be aware of that before you file for retirement. Some of you under the old civil service retirement system also might be making voluntary contributions to the retirement system. You may also need to file an application for a refund of those contributions when you file for retirement. Some additional things you may have to consider is when we talked about the insurable interest election, remember I said you have to prove your insurability, which means you have to get some documentation showing that you're in good health. So that just means you go to your physician and get a statement of your health by getting a physical. Retirement might also be a good time to update your beneficiary designations, and you can do so by getting the different beneficiary forms online for TSP, Civil Service, or FERS, as well as FEGLI. You can find your original beneficiary forms either in your personnel folder, which would be the one for FEGLI or FERS, or maybe you have your beneficiary forms somewhere safe at home. Now the one for TSP has filed with the TSP, so that one won't be in your personnel folder. So your Thrift Savings Plan beneficiary form is always filed with the Thrift Savings Plan, so you may want to file a new one and mail it to them anytime right before you retire, or anytime you feel like it needs to be updated. The one for civil service retirement also won't be in your personnel folder. That one is always filed at OPM as well. So if you want to update that one, the easiest thing might be just to file a new one and mail it in. We were talking a minute ago about civil service employees who might make voluntary contributions. If you'd like to make those contributions at the time you retire, you may actually have to establish the account with your retirement application. So the form to do that is the standard form 2804, and that's listed here on the slide so that you can find that on OPM's website as well. But on the other hand, if you've already made voluntary contributions and you want to take the money out or have it transferred to your IRA, you need the form to elect the withdrawal, which is a retirement and insurance form, which is 38124. So forms for everything, isn't there? Now, along with retirement, you may also be concerned about continuation of your insurance. Let's talk for a minute about life insurance, health insurance, and also your long-term care and dental and vision coverage. With life insurance and health benefits, there are requirements to carry those benefits into retirement. One is that you're eligible to retire with an immediate retirement. That just simply means you're old enough to retire, you have enough service to retire. So let's say you're leaving this month and your first retirement benefit starts next month. That's an immediate retirement as opposed to a deferred retirement. The second condition to carry your health and life insurance into retirement is that you've held that coverage for 5 years. So with your federal employees' health benefits, that's documented on your enrollment form. That standard form 2809 when you enroll in federal health benefits shows the date you enrolled. So we need to see 5 years of coverage to show you've had coverage for 5 years. Now, some of you may have been covered as part of that 5 years under your spouse's federal health benefits enrollment. Well, that still counts as part of your 5 years, but your agency may not know about that. So you may need to get a copy of your spouse's enrollment form to include with your retirement to show you've had 5 years. Did you also know that TRICARE can be counted as part of the 5 years? So if you're a military retiree or a family member of a military retiree, you can bring proof of your TRICARE coverage to include with your retirement as long as you're enrolled in FEHB on your last day of federal service, and you can count that TRICARE coverage as part of the 5 years. So that also is something you may need to put in with your retirement paperwork. As far as life insurance goes, again, 5 years under the basic life as well as any of the options is the requirement to carry that benefit into retirement. You also need to fill out a form to continue FEGLI into retirement as far as letting OPM know how much of it you want to keep and how you want it to reduce as you get older. It's called Continuation of Life Insurance Form, and you'll get that off of OPM's website as well. And when you talk to your retirement specialist, they probably have all the retirement papers together for you to fill out so that it's not so hard to find them all. When you're continuing that FEGLI coverage, keep in mind that we just had an open enrollment last September where some of you may have increased your life insurance if you're still on the payroll if you haven't retired yet. Now that new life insurance that you just signed up for last September won't take effect until this year in 2017. So obviously that hasn't been in effect for 5 years, and if you retire before October of 2022, you won't be able to carry that additional life insurance with you into retirement. But anything that you have held for 5 years will continue if you want to keep it. Now the FEDVIP, which is your dental and vision supplemental coverage, and FELTSIP, which is the long-term care plan through the federal government, those benefits can also go into retirement just like your other insurance, but they don't have a 5-year test. And those are benefits that retirees can enroll in even if they didn't have them as employees. So they have no 5-year coverage test, but if you do have them before you retire, you can keep those benefits moving into retirement. Keep in mind that in that transition period between your last day of employment and when OPM finalizes your retirement claim, you might get a bill for a month or two of benefits under FEDVIP and FELTSIP. If you do, simply pay the bill every month until OPM finalizes your retirement claim, and that will continue those benefits for you. Once your claim has been finalized, you'll start seeing the withholding for the dental and vision, and long-term care plan come out of your retirement benefit. You don't have to worry about paying for your health benefits or life insurance separately. That will automatically continue through OPM. But the other two benefits you might get billed. I wanted to mention something for those of you who might be already past age 65 at the time you retire. You may have enrolled in Medicare Part A when you turn 65, but you may have decided to delay enrollment in Medicare Part B until your retirement to avoid paying the premium. The current premium for Medicare Part B for most people is $134 a month. And again, we did do a Federal Benefits Institute webinar on Medicare just last fall. So if you want more information about Medicare enrollment, please watch that webinar because we did a lot of information on that. But if you're enrolling in Part B at the time of retirement, you're going to need two forms. You're going to need the Medicare enrollment form, which you're going to mail to Social Security or take to your local Social Security office. And you're also going to need the proof of employment information form that your agency and payroll office will have to fill out for you to show that you had current employment health coverage that allows you to avoid the penalty for late enrollment in Medicare Part B. Now, once you're retired and enrolled in both Medicare A and B as a retiree, keep in mind that at that point, Medicare will now become your primary payer for your health care. So you want to let your health plan know that you're now enrolled in Medicare as a retiree. That way, they'll know that they become the secondary payer. Plus, when you go to see your health care providers, let them also know that you're now retired and enrolled in both Medicare as well as your federal health benefit plan. That way, there shouldn't be too many mistakes when it comes to billing. So finally, the day has come for you to retire. So on the day of retirement, what happens that day besides packing up your final pictures and all the things from your desk and getting ready to walk out that door for the last time? Well, you might have an exit interview, and I would recommend you might make some copies of things from your personnel folder if you haven't already done so. I would even make a copy of my entire official personnel folder because you never know what in that folder you might need later on. Whether it's a training form to show what type of training you've had, or whether it's a record of service to verify that you've had that career of federal service, never hurts to have those records in your own possession. So I always say keep your own personal personnel folder. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you do it before you walk out the door. Keep in mind that final SF50, the one that shows your separation, will come to you after you've separated. So be sure to keep a copy of that one as well. You'll also have to sign your Certified Summary of Federal Service. That's a form that was actually part of your retirement application that your agency filled out for you. You may have already signed that before your last day on the job, but if not, be sure that you do sign it before you walk out the door. That's the cover sheet of your retirement package when it goes to OPM to show when you started your career and where it ended and what type of retirement you're applying for, whether it's disability, early retirement, law enforcement, or just optional retirement. So you want to be sure that everything on that summary of service is correct. Another thing I'd recommend is that you get a contact number for your personnel office or your human resource specialist, as well as perhaps somebody in the payroll division. What if you don't get your lump sum annual leave payment? What if you're in retirement and you haven't heard anything from OPM? Who do you contact at your agency? So get an email address or a phone number so that you have a contact person that you can connect with, just in case you have questions in that transition period between leaving the agency and getting picked up at OPM. Never hurts to have somebody that you can contact and ask that important question. So now the waiting begins. So the first month after retirement, there's a lot going on at your agency. Your payroll office is finishing up your last paycheck. They're getting ready to pay out your unused annual leave. Your human resource office is putting together that final package of paperwork to mail to OPM so that you can get your retirement benefits started. Now you might say, I turned that application in 3 months ago. Why didn't they already send it to OPM? Well, keep in mind, retirement is a voluntary action, so they can't really send it to OPM until the day after you separate. But they'll try to get it out real quick, and hopefully within a week or two after you leave, it's on its way to OPM. Now, you should be getting your last paycheck on time, just on the regular payroll schedule. Remember, when you were hired, they withheld that first paycheck by 2 weeks, so now you'll get your last paycheck 2 weeks after you leave. You'll also be getting your lump sum for your unused annual leave within 6 to 8 weeks after you retire. Sometimes your payroll office might skip a pay period just in case you owe them some money. They're going to withhold that from your annual leave check. But you'll eventually get your unused annual leave payment from your payroll office. Now, your sick leave is not paid out in cash. Remember, your sick leave is converted to service and added to your retirement benefits, so you won't get paid for your sick leave. Now, in addition to that, if you did apply for Social Security retirement, you should be getting that first payment the first month of your retirement. Now we're into the second month. So if we had retired on May 31st, so the month of June was the first month, now we're into the month of July. This is our second month of retirement. So now we should be hearing from OPM. The Office of Personnel Management should now send us our Civil Service Annuitant number, or our ID number, from OPM. It's called our CSA number. So we'll get that in a letter from OPM, and hopefully shortly thereafter we'll get our first interim retirement check from OPM. This interim payment is kind of meant to tide us over or give us some money to hold us over until they can finalize the claim. They're going to send us a portion of our retirement, hopefully pretty close to what our net income should be once our retirement claim is finished. So that interim payment's going to come from OPM, and we'll get another one every month until they're finished with the claim, until everything is finished and they can say that it's complete. Also, if we do want to take money out of our TSP account, this would be the time we can first make our application. The Thrift Savings Plan wants to be sure that you're off the payroll, no longer a federal employee, before you can start to withdraw money from your TSP account. So I would recommend you wait 30 days after you're off the payroll before you make a request to take a TSP distribution. All right, here's our second test your knowledge question. So what do you think would be the best thing to do if your CSRS or FERS retirement benefit has taken longer than 2 months or that 60 days to process? So if you're not in that average of 70% of the people who get their claim processed in 60 days, and now yours has taken longer, what should you do? So would you recommend that you call your congressman? Should you call OPM, get on the phone and get in that queue of the 1.6 million people who are trying to call in? Should you just be patient and wait a little longer? Maybe you should call back to your former agency and complain to them about how long it's taking, or maybe just call down here at NARFE. What do you think would be the best thing to do if it's taken more than 60 days? Now, you may not like my answer, but I would recommend just wait a little longer. It's really not that unusual for it to take longer than 60 days. I've seen many claims that take sometimes 90 days, sometimes 4 months. That's really not that unusual. If you're getting the interim payments and they are coming out pretty close to your net monthly annuity, I wouldn't worry about it too much. It can take time for OPM to put together that complete case. Remember, it's paper processing. Remember that there's only a few employees compared to how many thousands of cases that they're getting in, so it does take some time. So I would allow for that and be patient. But on the other hand, if it's been 9 months or if it's something where you haven't heard anything yet from OPM, then I would start to call any number of the options on this list. Probably starting with my former agency if I haven't heard anything, and then go down the list from there. But I try to have a little patience there. Okay, so now we're into that third month, and hopefully we're at the point where OPM is ready to finalize our claim, finish up the loose ends. Everything is now coming together, and we're going to get our first regular check. Now, back in the old days, they used to provide you what almost looked like an insurance policy when they finished your claim. But today, OPM sends you a little booklet that finalizes your retirement claim and summarizes your benefit by letting you know your health coverage, your life insurance coverage, your tax withholding, and the value of your monthly benefit. So once you get that retirement booklet, that Welcome to Retirement booklet, that's your indication that you should see a deposit in the bank with anything that OPM owes you. Hopefully they've underpaid you a little on the interim pay, so they owe you a little lump sum payment. And from that point forward, you should start getting your full and same amount of retirement benefit, at least until the next cost of living adjustment comes due, or until your rate of health benefit changes or some other change occurs to your retirement benefit. So once that happens, then things should start going much smoother. So that first regular check generally comes 60 to 90 days, maybe 120 days after retirement. So don't be alarmed if it does take longer than 60 days. That's really not that uncommon. Your TSP payments, if you did apply for them a month ago, they should be starting up soon as well. They don't take that long to process, as long, again, as you got that application in and filled it out properly. The TSP has an online process of the application, and filling that out online is going to make it go a lot smoother as well. So what are some of the things that can delay this process? What are some of the things that can cause a hitch? Well, sometimes OPM is obtaining missing documentation. Sometimes when that package is put together, there are things that are missing. It could be something missing from payroll, such as part of your retirement record that's documenting part of your contributions to the retirement fund for your career, or maybe your military deposit that you made in the past. Maybe it's part of your health benefit coverage, showing the 5 years of coverage. Maybe it's part of the application for retirement for the continuation of life insurance, perhaps. It could be the divorce decree that you didn't include. So be sure that everything that you need to include is there. The marriage certificate, the divorce decree, the application itself, and make sure it's all signed. Double check everything before you turn it in, and like I said before, make copies of it so that you can refer back to it in case something does go wrong. Determine your eligibility. OPM's making sure you're old enough to retire, making sure that you have enough service to retire for the type of retirement that you've applied for. Some of you could be applying for disability retirement, which of course will require medical documentation and medical review. Some of you might have retired under a VERA VSIP or an early out. So again, that's a different type of eligibility. You might be under special provisions for law enforcement or firefighter. So again, they're verifying that as well. Some of you might have retired with other calculations, such as civil service offset or the calculation of part-time service. And again, those things can be a little more tedious. And when it comes to civil service offset, that has to be coordinated with Social Security Administration. So now we're pulling in another agency to have to coordinate with. So you can imagine that that's going to take a longer time to process as well. Some of you may be retiring under FERS and you're younger than 62 and you're entitled to that FERS supplement. Keep in mind, during that interim period while you're getting those partial payments, that supplement's not being paid. So when your retirement's finalized, you'll get that catch-up payment that will include the supplement that you're due. During this interim period as well, OPM may be sending you some additional information. So keep in mind that if you're going to take that big vacation right after you retire, be sure that you have a neighbor looking at your mail or checking your doorstep to be sure nothing's being delivered from OPM, because you don't want to miss out on the opportunity to make an election. There are certain things that will say if you don't respond within 30 days, this is what we're going to do. So be sure that you watch out for your mail or for emails as well. And when you file your retirement application, be sure you give your current address, and if you are moving, give that forwarding address and the date that it takes effect. It's very important that OPM can get a hold of you during those months during the time your retirement's being processed in case they need to send you information about your survivor election. The alternative form of annuity, which is mentioned here on this slide, that would be for someone who's retiring in very poor health. An employee who's retiring on a regular retirement but who has a serious life-threatening illness can request a refund of their retirement contributions, but you have to provide medical documentation. If you're in that situation when you retire, talk to your HR specialist and they can tell you about the alternative annuity option to withdraw your retirement contributions in a lump sum payment in exchange for a reduced retirement benefit. Voluntary contributions or excess contributions might require some communication from OPM before your retirement gets processed. Excess contributions would be for employees who have worked long enough under the old retirement system to exceed a benefit worth more than 80% of their high 3 salary. This is the CSRS system. In those situations, you may get a refund of your excess civil service contributions that you've paid into the retirement fund with interest. So you want to be around to get that payment and to make the decision of what you want to do with that money. If you have an unpaid deposit or redeposit, OPM is going to give you one last chance to pay that money back to avoid the reduction to your retirement. So again, after retirement, if that's still unpaid, you're going to get some communication from OPM regarding that payment. Now, if you're under the MRA plus 10, that's minimum retirement age of FERS, somewhere between 55 and 57, and you have the minimum of 10 years of service but less than 30, and you want to retire under those provisions, OPM is going to ask you for the date you would like your benefit to begin, whether you want it to start right at your MRA or you want to postpone it until you're closer to 60 or 62 years old. So again, there may be some communication between you and OPM that you need to respond to, and of course the sooner you respond, the quicker your claim can be finalized or adjudicated. So the last thing that happens, of course, is OPM will authorize your annuity and send you that annuity statement. As I mentioned earlier today, I said you can call OPM, you can write to them, you can even visit OPM in person. About 4,000 people a year actually go to the walk-up window at OPM headquarters in Washington. But the most efficient way and the quickest way to get a response from OPM is to go to their online services for annuitants. So when you set up an online account, you can do many things there. So let's go over some of the things you can do online, as many people do. Over 1 million people last year used the online services. So you can find your 1099 there. So when it's time to file your tax return, get a copy of your 1099 right there off of opm.gov. You can find your ID card that shows that you're a civil service retiree with your CSA number on Services Online. You can get an up-to-date summary of your payments so you know how much you've received so far this year from OPM right there. If you want to know your life insurance coverage, that's also available online services. And if you're in interim pay and you want to know the status of your claim, you can check online services once you get your CSA number and find out how far along your case is in the process. Some other things you can do is change your tax withholding. When you file for retirement, you elect federal tax withholding on your retirement application, but you might have noticed that you did not elect state tax withholding. If you live in a state that taxes your federal retirement benefit, you won't be able to elect state tax withholding until your claim is final. You can do that on Services Online, but it won't be until your claim has been finalized. You can change your address at Services Online, so when you move, be sure to keep your address up to date so those important communications from OPM keep coming. Even your email address is important to keep up to date. If you want to set up another allotment out of your retirement payment, you can do that at Services Online as well as change your direct deposit. And of course, your annuity statement, kind of like your leave and earnings statement, can be printed out from Services Online. Now, after retirement, if anything changes, such as you get married or divorced, or if there's the death of the spouse, or if you pass away, your family members can report that at OPM's website. You can make changes to survivor benefit elections after retirement. You can make changes to your health benefits after retirement as well. So the same way as you make life event changes as an employee, retirees make similar types of changes in retirement. So be sure to notify OPM in a timely manner, because some of these changes have time limits before it's too late to make the change. Now, we're not really talking a whole lot today about Social Security, but again, we've done other webinars on these subjects, but since we are talking about the retirement process, let me just mention that if it is time for you to apply for Social Security retirement, you can go to ssa.gov and do that process right online. And just like anything else that's done on the internet, it's going to be a lot quicker. You can, of course, call Social Security on the phone to apply or even visit your local Social Security office. But the online application only takes about 15 minutes and it's not very hard to do. So I'd encourage you to give it a try, at least try that first, and then try the other methods, which will take a little bit longer to do. With the Thrift Savings Plan, and again, next month our webinar topic is going to be the TSP, take it or leave it, so I hope you join us next month. But you can make a partial withdrawal after you separate. So let's say that you don't want to start monthly payments, but you want some money from your Thrift Savings Plan. You're allowed to do a one-time partial withdrawal after you retire from federal service, as long as you haven't done an in-service withdrawal before you left. So you can use the TSP 77, which is the form to make a part-time or partial withdrawal. As long as you have at least a request for $1,000 or more, that's considered a partial request. Now there is a deadline for taking money out of your thrift, and that deadline would be April following your separation if you're over 70 and a half years old. So it's the later of April 1st of the year you turn 70 and a half, or April 1st after you retire or separate from federal service. Now the TSP is going to let you know about that, so they'll send you a notice warning you that if you miss that deadline, there is a penalty. Number one, your account balance will stop earning interest. So until you come back to let them know where you are, the account just stops accruing interest altogether. Plus, there's a penalty on the amount that you should have taken out but didn't. So be sure not to miss that deadline for required minimum distributions. So when it comes to TSP withdrawals, one thing you want to do is read the booklet on withdrawing your TSP account after leaving federal service. It's full of very useful information on the different withdrawal options. Also read the tax notice. The TSP is all about tax-sheltered savings, so keep in mind when you start taking the money out, that's the time you pay the tax. Complete your TSP 70 form to request a full withdrawal, or the TSP 77 form to request a partial withdrawal. And all of this can be found on tsp.gov or by calling the Thrift Line at their toll-free number. But remember what I said before, wait at least 30 days after you separate to make that request. Okay, so that concludes our presentation part of today's webinar. Now I want you to hang on because we're going to give you some instructions of how to join us for the online chat. So be sure to listen into that. David Snell is going to come down shortly and join me as we get ready to chat with you online. So we'll be typing in our answers and you'll be typing in your questions. We're going to get to as many of those as we can. Now, of course, if we don't get to your question today, and I know if it's like any other webinar that we do, there's usually so many questions that come in that we can't get to every single one, but we'll do as many as we can. But if we don't, fedbenefits@narfe.org, any time of the day or night is where you can go to ask questions, or simply call NARFE headquarters and you'll be directed to someone who can help you. So please stay tuned to the information that will help you to join us in our chat. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for participating in this NARFE Federal Benefits Institute webinar. Our host presenter Tammy Flanagan will now take questions in an online chat. She will answer as many questions as is possible in the 1-hour time frame. In order to keep the conversation lively and applicable to all participants, please use this time to ask questions of a general nature. We anticipate some duplication of questions and will aim to answer those only once. To join this online chat, please go to www.narfe.org/chat. Once on the chat site, scroll down. At the bottom of your screen, you will see the area where questions and comments may be typed. The first time that you use the question and comments area, you will be asked to provide a display name for this event. After you have entered your name, simply click the Set button. Once you have entered a question, don't forget to click Send to submit. We would like to remind you that NARFE prides itself in providing federal benefits guidance to our members. Our federal benefits experts are available beyond this webinar via email at fedbenefits@narfe.org or by calling NARFE at 703-838-7760 and simply pressing the number 2. We will now end this webinar and look forward to joining you in the chat room.